Hello and welcome back to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel, your source for all things Everton. My name is Thomas, back on the channel today with another opposition view, and always one of my favourite ones to do of the season. We're going to be joined by a fellow Geordie, and this year that Geordie comes in the form of Norm from the True Faith podcast. Norm, thank you very much for coming on today. How are you doing, mate?
Absolute pleasure, mate. Good to talk with you, and also just lovely to chat with a fellow Gateshead lad. And what can I say? Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll just get straight to the point. Obviously, neither of us have particularly enjoyed the season so far, but it looks like it might be slightly picking up on the footballing side anyway. So, obviously, we haven't met yet because of the constant rearrangement, so we do still have to play twice, and we'll definitely discuss how important that might be later on in the video. But we'll start off with, well, it's difficult to say your season so far because you've almost had two completely different seasons, but we'll talk about kind of post-Bruce, post-takeover. How's it been kind of since Howe arrived?
Incredibly optimistic initially. That was the initial reaction, was like this huge relief that Mike Ashley had gone. Huge relief. And then obviously we had one more game with Steve Bruce, a very weird situation where Bruce was more or less a dead man walking, but he managed the team against Spurs. And at that point, you know, that Spurs game, the takeover happened. Staveley was in the crowd, but Bruce was still there in the dugout. You still had the Sports Direct signs up, so it never really felt like he was gone to me in that precise moment. But then the moment Bruce leaves, those signs come down. Howe's installed as manager, because we had an interim period with Graham Jones as well. So there was a little bit of a limbo period. But since then, my optimism hasn't dipped, because obviously the takeover has happened and we know that the club's going to invest going forward. There's ambition there now that hasn't been there for a long time. But we're still in a very, very tough dogfight, a relegation battle. Howe's had a tough run of games. You know, there are games that maybe we would have looked at and thought we ought to win them. We haven't. You know, Brentford at home, for example, Watford at home. And it's been a bit of a struggle. We've lost quite heavily. Lost heavily to Leicester, lost heavily to Man City. But there are signs that we're turning the corner. We're playing better football than we ever were under Bruce. Players are definitely improving. And the transfer window, to me, has been a bit of a success. So I think all in all, you know, take the win against Leeds into consideration as well. All in all, I think right now, probably we're mostly feeling very optimistic that we're going to avoid relegation and kick on for the bright future that awaits us, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a very kind of topsy-turvy season, and maybe it wasn't quite a false dawn. I won't go that far, but obviously when Howe came in, the results didn't quite turn around straight away, and it still seemed tricky, and it always felt like you were trying to get to January to eventually make those improvements. But kind of looking forward, obviously, you were linked with a lot of names at the time. I mean, you've been linked with every name under the sun, but managerially, was Howe maybe the man that you kind of expected to come in, and are you confident he's going to lead you forwards? The results are kind of just starting to turn around, the performances are starting to turn around, but was he kind of your first choice initially, or was that a bit of an odd decision to you?
I wouldn't say it was an odd decision. I don't think anyone would have put him down as the favourite. And I think, you know, it was quite clear that approaches were made for Unai Emery. It looked like he was going to be announced, and then all of a sudden there were issues around the fact that the club had kind of made it public on the eve of a Champions League game, so that supposedly put him off. That may well be the case, or he may well have just thought, you know what, no, I don't want that. Then we had heavily links with Fonseca as well, obviously. I think a lot of fans, I'm seeing a lot of fans look at me, let's say, me mates, right, which isn't a lot of fans, but, you know, I think many of us, me definitely, I would love to have seen Benitez come back. That's the truth of the matter. But obviously, he was managing Everton at the time, widely disliked by Everton fans. But at Newcastle, his stock was still very much held in high regard, and I would have liked to have seen that happen. But it was never going to happen. Emery, as I say, would have been great. There were stupid rumours like people like Conte, for example, being thrown in the mix because he wasn't in the Spurs job at this point. But as time sort of wore on, you know, the name of Howe, it got mentioned more, you know, it started resonating. And then you start thinking, when you think, well, actually, you know, the job that Howe did at Bournemouth was pretty excellent. They got relegated in his last season, but ultimately that was COVID football. He's managing a club that gets attendances of 12,500. To keep them in the Premier League for 5 years is a pretty spectacular achievement. He was renowned for playing good football. He was highly thought of. But, you know, after his first couple of seasons at Bournemouth, there mentions him being a future England manager, perhaps going to Spurs. He was linked with other jobs. And he come in and I backed it. I thought it was a very good decision. And subsequently, look, do I think Howe was the manager who was going to get like an instant reaction like Conte, right? So let's say Conte walks into the dressing room and you know there's going to be an instant change, right? Because this is a manager who's won everything. He's an absolute legend. He's got that kind of personality that players will just be straight away bang, like they'll switch into better players immediately. With Howe, it was always going to take more time, and that's proven to be the case. But there are signs that he's kind of taking the club in the right direction. Whether or not Howe's the man to lead Newcastle, as I say, into this glorious future, who knows? But ultimately, right at this precise moment in time, I'm very confident that he can keep us up, and then it's going to be a question of getting to pre-season and seeing what moves can be made in the transfer market.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the transfer market, as I mentioned earlier, it did seem like you were just trying to get to this point, get the money in, try and recruit well. And actually, you probably spent more than anyone was really expecting. I personally didn't expect you to spend this much, and I think there were the rumours you only had a 50 million budget or whatever that was. But look, there was probably 9 or 10 positions you had to strengthen. That wasn't all going to happen overnight in January. But are you happy with the business that you've done? Are you excited for it?
I'm delighted with the business that's been done. We needed to bring in at least one centre forward. We did. Chris Wood. There are arguments that we ought to try to bring in a second, but ultimately nobody's expecting one of the forwards to get injured for in the way that he has, which is Callum Wilson, right? So we brought in a forward. We need the centre midfielder. We got one. We got a highly rated Brazilian national coming in. Very exciting signing. We needed a centre-half. We brought one in, one with a lot of Premier League experience, left-footed, can play on the left-hand side of the pitch as well. Kieran Trippier has an incredible signing. I mean, this is a lad who's really, okay, he's 31 years old, but I would say he's arguably at the peak of his kind of playing powers, and he's just spent 2 seasons in Spain under Diego Simeone, who was a wonderful coach. So he's left England and he's come back a better player. He's a fantastic signing. Matt Targett, incredibly sensible player, probably the first genuine left back we've had since Jose Enrique, you could argue. Really, really happy, a solid signing for a side that's in the position that we are. And I mean, all in all, it's been a very, very good win. We're in a lot better position now than we were this time last month. I think the signings have been sensible, and also what I do like is we haven't gone out and brought someone in who's being paid like 250 grand a week, which you bring that kind of player into a dressing room in a relegation battle, and this player's on say 2 or 3 times the money of the player next to him, and that can cause like a bit of disharmony. And I think Howe intentionally has looked at it and thought, I need to bring players in who are going to fit into this kind of wage structure that we have at present. So I think that harmony that he's trying to engender it's vital. It's vital between now and the end of the season, and all those signings I think fit right in with what he's trying to do. And do I think that maybe, let's say, Dan Burn, Matt Targett, Chris Wood are like the kind of long-term future of a club that wants to kind of push on and wants to become one of the biggest clubs in the world? You could argue probably not, but for right now, the situation we're in, I think they're excellent signings.
Yeah, I think they make a lot of sense as well, because they're all domestic signings. Obviously, as you mentioned, Trippier was in Spain, but he's played in England before, and that's what you need. You need players to come in who know the league, instant impact. Obviously, your big money signing Bruno, and I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name. I'm not sure about that. We'll have to see how he develops. But in terms of strengthening your squad, I definitely think you've done that quite well. We'll see how that develops really. But on the other hand, we've also had a busy January in the quite a different way. We've sacked a manager, we've sold a fan favourite, we brought in another manager, signed a player on loan that doesn't really make a lot of sense. We brought in Van der Beek and Ali last minute. Been chaos. What have you made of Everton's January, really?
I mean, look, it's almost offered a microcosm of the last few years under Moshe and Kenwright. You've just, it looks, from the outside looking in, it looks like it's been chaotic, which, it's kind of reflective of how you have been for a few years. I don't think that's an exaggeration. From a Newcastle fan perspective, obviously, it's sad that it didn't work out for Benitez. It's sad the way that it ended, because he's still very well liked, but that's football, right? It's cruel, and Lampard comes in. I was very surprised with Lampard being announced as your manager. I think, you have mentioned that the kind of market for available managers right now is quite small. So out of the people that were available, he's probably one of the best. But I look at Lampard and I think, well, he had a lot of money at Derby, didn't take them up. He did very well at Chelsea in his first season, no two ways about it, with the youngsters from the academy, brilliantly well. Second season, he was backed and it went really badly wrong. So I'm looking at it right now thinking, Everton, if we beat you at 1 point behind you, that puts you in a relegation battle. I'd be a little bit nervous if I was an Everton fan about Lampard, a manager with such little experience, a manager who hasn't experienced a relegation battle. I'd probably be nervous. But ultimately, the flip of that is that you've had a really terrible time lately under Benitez. You've got a new manager come in, you've won 4-1, and you brought in 2 players in Dele Alli, who, he hasn't been particularly good for the last couple of seasons, but he's a really good player. We know that he's still young. He's still got time to rediscover the form that he showed a few years ago when he was arguably one of the best midfielders in the world at the 2018 World Cup, if you look at it like that. And Van der Beek as well for Ajax the season that they got to the semis, I think, in the Champions League. He was incredible. So, you know, there are reasons to be optimistic, I can see, but at the same time, it would probably be tempered with a little bit of nerves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that you've probably kind of voiced the opinions of a lot of Everton fans there. It's excitement, slight apprehension because it's so unknown. We've brought in two players who, you know, haven't quite hit the height that they probably should have at this point in this career. Lampard is still a fairly unknown manager, but look, it's exciting. Nonetheless, we're looking towards the match, really. It's probably quite difficult for you to predict your lineup that you might come out with after all the signs you made, but is there any way you can kind of predict maybe the lineup and the system and maybe some key injuries that you might have? I'm not really sure who's out at the moment.
The key injuries, Callum Wilson, obviously he's a wonderful footballer, Callum Wilson, an all-round centre forward whose goals rate in Newcastle, his chances to conversion rate is phenomenal, and he's a leader as well. But he is injury prone. He's been injury prone more or less across the course of his Premier League career, and he's out for a long time. But he's the only real substantial injury that we have. We're more or less at full strength. How I'd imagine we'll play 4-3-3. That seems to be the system he settled on. It worked well against Leeds. I personally would like to say 4-2-3-1, but I'm not the manager of Newcastle, and, you know, I should never be allowed to be in that position because I'd be terrible at it. Obviously, I'm just a fan who chats shit. But it'll be 4-3-3. I'd assume that we're going to have, you know, Dubravka in goal. He'll have Trippier at right back. I would think that Target will start at left back. The centre-half position, I would definitely think Dan Burn will start on the left-hand side of the back two. It's whether or not he lines up alongside Lascelles or Shea. My preference would be Shea, but it'll probably be Lascelles, club captain and everything like that. Midfield, I mean, we've got options, right? The three in midfield. I would like to see Guimarães start because he's a £40 million Brazilian international and we're all very excited about him. Obviously, he's just come back from Brazil. He may start from the bench, who knows? But you'll be looking at, I'd imagine, Shelvey, Guimarães, and tricky one, possibly Joe Linton or Willock. I'd like to see Willock in because his ability to kind of arrive late in the box. I think that might test your back line. And then up top as the kind of front three, you'd be looking at Fraser, Maximin and Chris Wood. I would say that'll more or less be our lineup.
Yeah, well, cheers for that. It's probably a very tricky one to predict when you make that many signings so quickly. And from maybe a weakness perspective, obviously, I mean, you've had a couple this season, but, you know, you've strengthened well in certain positions. So what would you say now are kind of the main weaknesses that Lampard will definitely be looking to exploit?
You know what? It's really funny because we've won 2 games all season. We've been shocking for most of it. But I'm looking at it now thinking, in terms of the players that we brought in and the team that we put on the pitch, it's almost hard to pick weaknesses as that sounds. But what I think you will be able to do is, Maximin is a gifted player. He's got one most assists. He's a top scorer. But he doesn't do a lot of defending. So, you know, down that right-hand side, if you kind of, our left-hand side, your right-hand side, if you kind of overload on that side, you will get balls in the box. Obviously, if Calvert-Lewin's back and you're getting balls in the box, as good as Dan Burn might be in the air because he is a giant, Calvert-Lewin is phenomenal in the air. So, you know, if your statistics tell you that if you're whipping sort of, 6 or 7 crosses in the box in the first half, Calvert-Lewin's going to get at least on the end of at least one of those. So that'll be a bit of a test. And also in midfield, you see, bringing in Guimarães might change that dynamic. But what I would have said is, in midfield, we do have a tendency to kind of either sit deep or when we attack, leave a massive gap, and that can be exploited by sort of pacey players. You know, you've got Demari Gray obviously in your lineup as well. If Van der Beek's playing, he can certainly do the kind of box to box role, but also arrive late in the box. So that'll be something I think Lampard will be looking at how weak we've been in the centre of the park. But apart from that, I mean, one of our key issues really is scoring a second goal. You know, we don't score 2 goals in a game. Really, I think this season maybe it's only happened 3 times. So if we go goal up, we may well get nervous. That might allow you back in the game. You might get an equaliser, and for us to get a second goal, it seems to be a bit of a sticking point. But I think what you're going to see, mate, is you're going to see a very tight game between 2 sides who, right now on paper, are probably very evenly matched.
Yeah, probably. I kind of agree on that. There's so many unknowns going into the match, considering what everyone's done in January, and it's a very tricky one to predict. Nonetheless, I'm going to ask you for your score prediction, mate. What do you think might happen?
I'm going to, you know what, I'm going to have to say it, but I'm going to say we're going to get that magical second goal. We're going to go goal up. you're gonna attack. We're gonna get a bit of space, and we're gonna get a second and win 2-0.
Yeah, no, yeah, interesting. I literally can't kind of figure out which way it's going to swing. Obviously, I'd always predict an Everton win, but we'll have to see. And my final two questions now, not kind of linked to the match at all, but Townsend and Rondon coming back to St James Park. Obviously, I think Townsend's probably been back before, but Rondon, this is probably his first visit. If he plays, how do you think they'll be received? Obviously,
well, both of them I think will be received very well. Rondon especially was such a pivotal player in the 18-19 season. He was absolutely wonderful for us. And toward the end of the season, when Almiron came in and we had Almiron, Perez, and Rondon up front, they were like unplayable at times. They were brilliant. So I think he'd be very, very warmly received. Look, we know what he is, right? He's a workman, like journeyman centre forward. But with that one season at Newcastle, he was magical for us. He really was. I know that obviously there's been quite a lot of criticism among Everton fans about him, which is understandable. He's not a prolific goal scorer, but no, he'll definitely get a warm reception. I think Townsend. He always speaks really highly of the club, and I don't think there's ever kind of any significant booing. You probably get a gentle round of applause, but I think Rondon will be the one who gets the kind of louder appreciation if he gets on the pitch. If he comes out and warms up, he'll definitely get a round of applause, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's quite funny. Like,
I might get one.
Yeah, I've obviously spoken to my mates, obviously, about kind of, we've ended up with Rondon and Benitez and Townsend, maybe everything you all wanted again, and the three players that we don't, well, two players in the manager we didn't really want, so I think we've got this fascinating link between the clubs now.
Well, you were on the verge of signing Longstaff as well before Benitez was binned, I believe. That was a rumour that was kind of persisted from the summer, so that would have been interesting. Certainly, there were a few players that we could have just gifted you for free. That would have been nice. Rafa could have got the old 16-17 boys back together at Everton, but there you go. Alas, it was never to be. I think from a Newcastle perspective, one of the best things about playing Newcastle at the moment, obviously, is the fact that we just get a chance to absolutely slaughter Jordan Pickford, and it over the years it does seem to have an impact on him. So very excited about getting into the stadium and throwing dogs abuse at Jordan Pickford. Nothing nasty, but probably some shouts focused on his background as a former Sunderland goalkeeper.
Yeah, well, hopefully he manages to keep his head this time as he hasn't in the past few years. But my final question anyway, we like to ask this at the end of every video, not entirely like the football. Imagine, I don't know, you're down Gate at High Street, you're stopping by Tesco or something, probably a reference that no one else will get other than ourselves. But if you go for any meal deal in the world, what is your go-to meal deal?
Any meal deal in the world?
Any meal deal. Doesn't even have to be Tesco.
God, mate, that is a heck of a question. Any meal deal in the world. You know what? I tell you where I like eating, mate. Do you ever been to Leon? You know Leon, the takeaway.
No, I've never been. No.
No, you know been to Leon? Oh God, then I have to think about something else. I tell you where, mate. If Wagamama did a 2-for-1, right? And I'm talking about those massive udon bowls you get. I would get two of them and do them in one session without even hesitating. So yeah, Wagamama would be my meal deal, mate, with a nice freezing cold kind of condensation on the outside bottle of Asahi. That'd be perfect. In fact, just thinking about it now makes me want to go out and do it.
Yeah, no, great response there. Anyway, thank you very much. Norman Riley there from the True Faith podcast, mate. Thank you very much for coming on. Where can our viewers find you if they want to find you after the video?
Our social media at TFNUFC, and you'll see me on there as well, but you would not, I don't know why you'd want to follow me. Follow at TFNUFC for sure, and check out the website, which is true-faith.co.uk, and YouTube, just search for True Faith and NUFC.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you very much, mate. Thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to let us know your score predictions down below. I'm obviously hoping for a good Everton result to keep this momentum going, but we'll have to see how it goes. But thank you all very much for watching, and join us next time on the Toffee Blues.